Now we are.
Shouldn't be an executive session.
No,
this isn't.
it's not the kind of issue which is reserved for executive session.
So if we discuss proposed,
Well, we're discussing what to put in the bid document.
yeah, but we're not gonna show the bid documents, right?
It doesn't matter if we do, they're subject to disclosure. I mean, they're gonna be advertised, so they're going
Yeah,
to.
but not until the date that they're advertised. I don't-
There's only 3 things we can talk about in executive sessions: litigation, personnel, and sale or purchase of real estate, so this would not qualify.
So, I'd like to, unless Jane would like to make some general comments. All right, so one of the first options which we had talked about is where haulers would pick up the trash. And we were trying to have we ended up with 4 different options, which ended up, could require 25 different options in bid documents. And more to the point of our assumptions being wrong, Jane did not think that people could do as many things as we thought they were able to do.
Right.
Like to.
We talked about like just logistics. Some of this trash is picked up in the alley for a reason, because of traffic flow or because of the size of the streets. The one area that we thought of quickly was Holland Square. You're not getting down there with a trash truck. You barely get down there with a pickup truck. Meaning you're telling me I have to pick up curbside, meaning I'm gonna bring in laborers to pull all this trash to a street. So in theory, you would think curbside is easy, it's consistent, but not in every case. So we think we may be paying dearly for something that really is not convenient for the residents.
And also, even when it's being picked up on streets, the truck can't do it by itself. They still need to have employees
Right.
bring the truck for the curb. So,
Because we talked about like Spring Township in comparison. Spring Township doesn't have the street parking that we see in the borough. So that truck is driving down the street, it's grabbing the trash can, it's emptying it and going to the next one. Here we're gonna need to get that trash from the sidewalk, past that vehicle, hopefully without damage, and then get the trash picked up.
So are you saying that's an example of why we shouldn't do any of that stuff?
No, I think that's a good example of why we probably don't wanna say curbside collection for the whole borough.
Yeah, I think we just said the same
Okay,
thing.
okay.
Okay, good.
so
So how much of the borough fits into that box?
Well, I think what we're looking at is let's stay with the existing schedule.
just not have options about where it's gonna be picked up.
Alright.
It's gonna be picked up where it's gonna be
All right,
picked up.
so
where
that's
it's picked up
something that
now.
we have to talk
The
about.
compromise seemed to be the same as now.
Right.
Which gives a little benefit to the people doing it now, because they know exactly
Right.
what they're doing, and the other potential bidders do not know what they're doing now. And how do we tell them?
We have a calendar, we have a map.
Yeah.
It's in the bid
It's no
documents at the
different than
back.
any other year that we've bid the contract, which is we include the current list that's in the Talking Trash publication that gives District 1 through 4. It says the day it's collected and it lists every street and then where it's picked up at.
Well, if we're not doing anything different than we're doing, everybody already knows what we're doing, so there should be no other work we have to do except everything's the same as it was before in this categorization, maybe other things which
Right.
we're going to cover.
Right, so is the consensus that we're not going to have all those different options, we're just going to have trash picked up where it's picked up now?
I like that, I just don't know how the other bidders
Okay,
will know that.
all right. Then we talked about the length of the contract. We had thought of a 2-year contract because we have 2 more years with Pioneer. Jane tells us that the 3-year contract is what folks are used to bidding on. And they're more willing to make investments in people and machinery if we have a longer contract. So her recommendation was we go with 3 contracts, making it clear that we're tying the Pioneer for 2.
Right, and that it's really, could be a 5-year contract if everyone plays well with each other. It's a 3-year with 2 1-year options for renewal at the borough's sole discretion.
And that is spelled out multiple times in very concise, clear language. 26 and 27, it goes to Pioneer. 28 the successful bidder that's awarded the contract is responsible for disposal costs.
So when we see that 3-year breakdown, that third year is gonna be much more expensive.
Correct. Yep. And then the borough gets out of the trash business, much
Well-
like most contracts.
But the total might not be more, because they might
Well, you-
find a landfill that's cheaper than Pioneer.
Right,
Express.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, their
But that
number
we
might
just
be,
know,
but
we
not the
look at
borough's
that
number.
third number
Right.
and it's gonna be
Right.
higher.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask a question. If we have an existing contract and we're looking to bid whatever we're gonna do here, and we know somebody has a 2-year contract, and we know what that's going to cost, do you have any idea what the inflation factor is with other bidders with regard to what we're now looking to do? Are we looking to find somebody who's going to bid, which we know everything's more expensive, that the bids from the new people would more than likely more than what we paid 3 years ago
Oh,
as part of our 3-year contract?
Certainly, right, that is correct.
Right.
But in this case, we need to keep our eye on that third year.
Sure.
And understand why it goes like this.
Right, but we're not gonna bid on a 2-year contract that's more expensive with the 2 years we have left, simply to get the third year, which might actually be less if we didn't get it, because prices may drop by the time we get the third year.
Well, you're gonna see that third year, the borough is paying $112-ish for trash disposal at Pioneer. Other municipalities are paying in the 60s at other landfills.
We're effectively double what everybody else is paying at other landfills.
So normally with these bids, do all the other municipalities kind of just have the trash hauler deal with that? It's kind of in their contract? They
In
don't
mo-
have a contract with the landfill?
In most cases.
Okay.
The reason why Missing, Spring, Kenhurst, West Reading, Shillington do that, the consistent factor is called the Western Berks landfill. And they never got out of the trash business. They owned that landfill, they sent their trash there, they sold the landfill, it stayed in the trash business for some reason.
Okay.
If you're not part of Western Berks, the hauler's responsible for disposal costs. It also gets you away from trash somehow getting on your truck and you paying for James trash somewhere else.
Okay.
So because we have a 2-year contract left,
Mm-hmm.
and we're paying $100 or so,
Yep.
right? Is that what you said?
We
112.
don't actually have a 2-year contract.
You have 2 years
Well,
left.
oh, meaning the extension
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
years, yes.
So if we have a 2-year
Pioneer.
extension, the only way, there's really no reason if we have a 2-year extension and we're paying twice as much as everybody else.
Oh, wait, no, you're mixing contracts.
Yeah.
We have a 2-year extension with Mascaro.
For disposal.
If we
have-
wanted to.
With Pioneer, we have 2 years left on the contract without
On a
extension.
10-year contract, so there's 2 years left.
Yes.
For the landfill, yeah.
So where the trash gets dumped has 2 years left with no extensions.
So is Mascaro connected to the
Yeah.
landfill?
He owns
One
it.
and the
Yeah.
same.
So if you have Mascaro for trash pickup, you also have Mascaro for landfill.
Well, their price has to be lower than the
Charge
other,
is separate.
than the other folks bidding.
Well, no, I understand, but you're saying that it's not, is it 2 contracts?
Yes.
With Mascaro?
Yes, one with
One
Pioneer
with Pioneer,
Crossing.
one with Mascaro.
All right, so we're doing both. Either we're doing both separately or both together?
No, we are stuck with the one Pioneer for 2 more years.
Okay, but we're not stuck with Mascaro for trash hauling.
Correct.
And that's what we're trying to figure out.
That's what we're bidding, yes.
So correct. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, all right, so the next question we need to work on is when will yard waste be picked up? We had a misunderstanding about our legal obligations, and Jane was very helpful in disabusing us of that. So the question is more, when is the best time for our residents to pick up the trash?
Pick up yard.
Yard
Yard
waste.
waste, I apologize, thank you.
So I was hoping we could go back and look at actual landfill disposal costs broken down by yard waste versus trash, but I can't see weekly or even really specifically anything beyond monthly. Which, going back to, if you look at tonnage totals, 22, 23, 24, yard waste tonnage in 22 March for yard waste was 22.22. In April, it jumps to 65.25. In March of 23, it went from 17.41 to 60.47 in April. And then 24, it went from 6.6 in March to 21.07 in April. So I think if you at least postpone starting until the beginning of April, you'd probably be okay.
Yeah.
We'd like an even number of weeks in case we go every other week, so that everybody will get the same number of pickups.
Approximately what is the last week in that 34-week span?
If we're talking about starting the third.
Right,
first
we
week of
started the
April,
third week of April.
34
What is-
weeks took us to the last week of November, first of December. So if we started
Okay.
like the first full week of April and kept 36 weeks, it would end around the same time.
Yeah, I think we need the amount of trees that we have that are late droppers. I think if we're gonna move it to April, the first week of April, we should extend it to 36 weeks.
But again, keep in
Well,
mind
now
that leaves are picked up by the borough, not part of this contract.
Well, in your, for the borough
Yeah,
trees.
correct.
For our personal trees, yeah.
Right.
But we could start the second week of April, just make it 36 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
I mean, how I currently,
35.
My feeling
We'll make it
about yard
35.
waste is my landscapers take my yard waste, so I'm taking advantage of this. And I don't know, people pay landscapers. Landscapers typically take yard waste. So I renegotiate my landscaping contract and
Oh, we should.
tell them to put it in a bag for
Yeah.
the borough to pick up.
I mean, also keep in mind, not everybody in the borough has a landscaper.
Well,
Of course.
Yeah, my husband was my landscaper, and everything goes curbside.
I don't think I'm telling some people, sort of out of school thoughts. But if you go up and down the boulevard with the trees that are on people's property, they're not standing in their yard filling up yard waste bags. They're pulling all
Yeah.
the leaves to the side, and nobody's looking at, oh, this is our leaf, that's your leaf. They're just picking up all the leaves. So I don't know if this is a answer without a question or what. But
Well, yard waste, you still, people
Still
pick
pick
up their
brush.
grass clippings, their
Branches,
leaves.
branches.
Pulling the
and-
flowers out.
Yeah, what's that?
there's no grass clippings in
Dumping in.
October and November.
Some years.
Yeah.
Yeah, some
There
years.
there might be,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the
not
99% of the stuff they're picking up is the stuff that ends up in outside in the street, which is all their leaves, not.
What do the October numbers look like?
If it
November numbers.
drops, well, it's interesting, you can tell weather. So November of 22, we actually went up 20 tons from October. It went from 39.53 in October to 57.04 in November. Same thing in 23, it went from 45.83 tons in October to 50.1 in November, but then in 2024, we went from roughly 13 tons in October to 6 in November.
What month is that?
We're comparing October to November.
That year was 24, that was just this past year?
Yeah. And then same thing, if you look at December, 22 was 6.51 tons, 23 was about 16 tons, and 24 was 1.5. So almost nothing.
Landscapers will typically do their fall cleanup at the last week of October, beginning of November.
So we're looking at second week of April for 36 weeks.
I'm not saying we can't change this, but what I have in the current draft of the bid specs is approximate third full week of April and continuing for 34 weeks.
So 34 weeks takes us to the last week of November, first week of December. So can we just move it to first week of April and keep it at 34 weeks, which puts us with the last pickup of yard waste in mid-November?
I'd rather have that second week of April than 36 weeks, but because you do have that March amount, 22 tons, 17 tons. Last year was an anomaly, we had drought at that point.
I think
Yeah.
more important than whether it's 34 or 36, is it every week or every other week?
Well, that's a different question.
Yeah, and that's
a
a
That's
more
a-
basic question, it's a matter of expense.
Well, but it's still covering the leaves dropping and flowers being picked out, raked up stuff during the same period of time, so.
So if you
Well, let's
are-
do the time period first and then
Are
frequency.
your numbers, are your numbers related to borough pickups? You're not, right?
Yeah, those are the boroughs.
Those are-
Meaning, not what the guys are
Yard
going
waste.
around,
Talking
yes,
about
strictly
yard
yard
Not
waste.
the, not the curbside.
Not, yeah,
talking
not the
about
guys going out and
curbside.
sucking
This
the
is
Are
the
those
bag,
numbers
this is the bag
curbside?
stuff.
Are these
Well,
yard waste?
curb or alley, depending where
Yeah,
it's
this
placed,
is-
but
this
it's
is the
yard
stuff that
waste,
Ms. Carroll
just
picks
yard
up,
waste.
not the borough.
Oh, all right.
This is the bagged yard waste.
All right, that's the one that's gonna bite us in the you-know-what. If we stop it at such a point, everybody's standing there waiting for them to pick up the leaves next to the sidewalk, which would be.
That's the borough.
That's the borough,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, that's
That's
not
what
what
we
we're
can do.
talking about. We're talking about.
But even
when
that
they pick up
stops.
the bags.
Roughly the second week of
Because-
December, cause they gotta just truck
Switch.
over for plowing.
Right.
So you're really talking about yard waste, but that number's not a yard waste number. That's.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
that's all it was. Yeah, that's not the leaf sucker. That's the bags.
Yard waste.
It is. Alright, so what week of April we're gonna start, first, second, third? On the second.
I like second.
Second's fine, yeah.
Okay,
36 weeks.
36 weeks?
Well,
That should take us to the beginning of December.
Well, we'll do 36 weeks if we decide on
Every other.
bi-weekly, but we can do 35 weeks.
Well, you don't.
No, you don't wanna
You
make
don't want anybody to get one more.
No. I'm just saying.
No.
Pinching pennies here. Yeah, 36 weeks
Easter.
is fine.
I know it's,
It changes
Depends on
every
the,
year.
depends on the year.
It could be in March, it could be in April.
Yeah.
I just think people having Easter egg hunts in their backyard.
Like, it was late this year, it was April 20th, but I can remember not too many years ago, it was like the third week in March.
Yeah, sometimes it is.
Alright, second week of April for 36 weeks? Okay. Now, we had also suggested two options, one picked up every week, one was every other week. I still think two options is a good idea, but what do you all think?
Every other week is gonna be half as much as every week.
Not necessarily, because you've
No,
got
it's
to
gonna
pay
be
for
double.
the
Because you gotta
pickup,
fill
plus
up.
you have to pay for the tonnage, like the amount, so, and they're not coming as often, but they're picking up twice as much every other week.
So they might need to make twice as many rounds in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's harming anything to put it in there as a request to be bid on it to see what the numbers come back.
Yeah, I think we
Right.
should look at both numbers,
Yeah.
both options, yeah.
Yeah, the options are good.
Okay.
And they know bi-weekly is every other week and not twice
You
a
okay
week?
with those two options?
They know
They
that,
know the
okay.
definition. We defined it.
Well, you know, you can do both
Yeah,
ways.
you're right.
I'm like, I don't want them coming twice a
I
week.
hate bi-monthly. Alright, next question, what are we going to recycle? We had originally talked about plastics 1 through 10, Jane tells us that there really aren't anything 8 through 10. So, 1 and 2 seems easier just to tell people 1 and 2, and then our instructions to them can be clear.
Cause like right now you say 1 to 10.
Right.
It goes 1 to 7 is the maximum types of plastic. But then you say 1 to 10, but no styrofoam, which is 7.
Right.
So you're saying you're not taking, you're kind of contradicting the two. So I think that when you look at what your list is, you're really saying plastic bottles and containers, not toys, not swimming pools, not swing sets. So I think it's really 1 and 2 bottles and containers.
I really still have it on here. Yeah, from that meeting that we had where you sent me that picture.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, she should be in there.
So while she's looking at pictures, everybody comfortable specifying plastics 1 and 2?
Unless your eyes are way better than mine. I'm trying to pull this up so you can actually see. So, I mean, this is showing you that depending what the number is on the piece of plastic, what it actually pertains to. So do we wanna include things we know people aren't actually recycling when it doesn't make sense?
Or if we did that, we'd be asking somebody, how much more money can we pay you to pick up something we don't need?
Yep,
So
pretty much.
why are we having that discussion?
Oh, so wait, so 5 is food containers, yogurt containers, so none of that would be recyclable anymore.
Well, they probably don't clean it out anyway.
And keep in mind that this is what you're telling the vendor he's gonna get. He also understands that 30% of what he gets is trash. It is all
Contaminated.
those things.
Right.
So to the extent that you put a yogurt in, it's not gonna be left at the curb.
Or tent yogurts.
Right?
All right, so 1 and 2? All right, and we're gonna bid glass and no glass?
Yep.
Question here is, can you put up Burn Township's numbers?
Is that what you sent me this morning?
Yeah. So Burn Township opened their marketing bids. Burn Township currently collects dual stream material. So they collect their bottles and cans and their paper separately. So they wanted to determine, do we want to go single stream? Do we want to do a toter program? Again, Burn Township, none of this curbs to deal with. So this is what the quotes that they got. So for bottles and cans, option 1A is your dual stream, bottles, cans. It's $35 a ton first year, looking at 2026. The paper, which is 1B, is $47. And then if you go to option 2, which is your single stream, is 52. I think it's 52 maybe. And that excludes glass. And then if you want to add glass, it's another $20 a ton. Unless you're JP Mascaro, then there's no additional charge for the glass. But they're significantly higher anyway. So the question is, we know we're gonna have glass. We know we're gonna put it in a landfill because we're not gonna collect it for recycling. So for at least the first 2 years, instead of us paying $20 or $70 a ton to recycle that, we're gonna pay Mascaro $112 to put it in his landfill.
Are those numbers in the second line, are those our Mascaro numbers?
No, this was bids that came in last week for Burn Township.
That
It was
is
from
Kugels.
That's Kugel.
Kugel's, but then JP Mascaro's right underneath it. They were the only 2 bidders.
And
JP Mascaro being the total recycle, which is where your material goes currently. Not the Pioneer Crossing landfill that he also owns. So JP Mascaro owns the trucking company, JP Mascaro, he owns the recycling facility, Total Recycle, and he owns the landfill Pioneer Crossing.
So is there any segregation between Kugel's and Mascaro in terms of what are they picking up in the rolls?
No, this is marketing the material, this is to their door.
Well, what I'm asking is, like, for option B,
The price
$50
difference
to
is
$109, it sounds like
Highway
Mascaro
robbery.
is picking it up in the Rolls Royce.
Perhaps. Again, nobody's picking it up, but it's showing up in a Rolls Royce to his facility.
So
Or
this
not.
is just what?
This is just marketing. So again, 1A is your bottles and cans, 1B is paper, and 2 is single stream. So the price you're really looking at with JP Mascaro is everything comes through his facility single stream. He's got one line that comes through. So everything first year is 107 a ton. If you're looking at Kugel's, you need to look at the 1A, which is 35 for the bottles and cans, and the 1B, $47.
So you add
you're
those two
so
together, you get
total,
closer
you're
to
looking
Mascaro.
You wouldn't, because there's tonnages for each of those.
So if you have
And
3 of those
so you don't
tonnages for
add them.
Kugel and you add them up, it comes out to 120.
But you don't
for
add
Mascaro.
them.
But you wouldn't, because like 1A, they're saying that they're collecting, I don't know, 100 tons, because I'm not good at math, of bottles and cans,
Yeah.
and they're collecting 50 tons of paper. So the 50 tons of paper for Kugel's would be 47, and it'd be 107 for Mascaro. And then the bottles and cans would be that 100 tons would be $35 a ton, as opposed to 107. So, and I think there was the comparison worksheet
Yeah,
that gave
but
you the totals.
I didn't-
That's fine.
Okay, so for JP Mascara, option 1A at 107 is just plastics.
That's the bottles and cans,
Bottles
correct?
and cans.
Yep,
And
not glass though.
Right, but not glass. And then to go to option 1B for mascara, it's just another $2 and they can add paper into there.
It's the same price, it's 107. So it's the
Oh, I'm
same,
looking at the next line.
yeah,
Right,
because
okay.
again, they're picking up the same material, they're picking it up where it's showing up in their facility altogether. Where Kugel's has a separate line. So the dual stream material comes in, is kept a little bit cleaner, so he gets more money for it, it's easier to process. So therefore you'd have the 1A, you're paying $35 a ton for your plastics and bottles and $47 for the paper. And there's how much tonnage for each of those.
Right.
But then really if you look at option two, that $52 versus 107, that's for single stream, everything comes in together, and that's the number.
Okay.
For JP Mascaro, there's no additional charge for the glass, other than you're gonna pay that 107 a ton for that.
Right.
For Kugel's, it's $52 a ton and an additional $20 if you throw glass in. But the issue is, now you're paying $70 as opposed to $112 for it to go into the landfill, at least for the first 2 years of this contract.
So how many of these a la carte things do you have to add up to compare to mascara? That's what I don't know.
What do you want compared to mascara? Cools versus mascara.
The numbers are better.
35 versus
Yeah,
107.
but mascara number's pretty much the same across the board, all the way to the bottom.
That's mascara's number compared. Cools is right above it.
No, I know that, but you're saying that you have to take the top Kugel in 2 categories to equal.
Nope,
No, you don't
you
add.
take 100 tons of of bottles and cans. If you wanna give it to Kugel's, it's 35. If you wanna take the same 100 tons to Mascaro, it's 107. If you wanna take the 50 tons or whatever the paper is to Kugel's, it's 47. That paper is 107 if it goes to Mascaro.
So mascara can be
Who pays
Well,
mascara?
2.5 to 3 times as much as
Kugel
Kugel.
for 47.
Nobody, if this
Per
is their
ton.
bid opening.
Right.
So this is to drop it
Drop.
off at the landfill,
At the recycling
at the
center.
recycling center,
Yep.
right?
And then the glass is, in our case, going to the landfill because it's being used as cover.
Right, but we are still gonna have to pay, do we pay tonnage to drop at the landfill in this contract?
For the first 2 years. Until that contract.
Right,
ends.
but it is by tonnage, we don't have like a flat rate where we can drop.
Tonnage, yeah.
So is there a way
It is a
to?
flat rate. I mean, flat per ton.
Per ton.
Right, it's not rate per
Doesn't
ton,
matter
yeah,
what-
right,
yeah.
right. But we're better off probably using glass and recycling likely
At least for the first 2
in the
years.
first 2 years.
Cause we know we're gonna pay for it to go there anyway.
Yeah,
Right.
we're gonna pay, we either have to pay for the glass at an extra $20 a ton for the glass to go in the landfill, which is still $30-40 cheaper than it to go, I mean, in the recycling than it to go to the landfill.
Right,
Does that make sense?
yeah, you are correct.
Yeah.
Can the bid documents have it so you only put glass for 2 years?
That's gonna be the
Recycling.
question, how
Yeah,
we word that.
I mean, you can, but again, the same issue you run into on that 3rd year is that vendor now is paying to put it in the landfill as opposed to taking it to recycling.
Yeah.
So
We'll pay one or the other. no
Right.
question.
right, so in 2028, it's what, 57, 67, like, $87, $90 a ton for you to recycle it as opposed to the trash hauler having paid to put that in the landfill. So you may be paying a couple bucks more, but I think it's
worth it for the
cleaner.
3rd year.
I think it's cleaner than really trying to confuse. All these things change on that 3rd year.
We went through that effort in utility, Jane, remember? We confused ourselves.
We did.
Yeah, I think in the long run, we're gonna save money theoretically. Depending on who bids what, but I mean, Kugel versus mascara, we're gonna save money by putting glass in recycling for 2 years.
Correct.
we're gonna spend a little bit more the third year, but does that overall
It balance out.
Yeah.
balance out, or maybe we still come a little under? Maybe we're slightly over, but we've saved glass for 2 more years.
Okay, so do we want
And then
the
on the other
option of
side
no
of
glass,
3
or we
years.
just gonna
Yeah, then
say,
after that 3 years.
or we just getting rid of the option, just say plastics 1 and 2 and glass and paper?
I see, let's see the options.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind bidding out both options, but this was like eye-opening to see
Yeah,
and discuss.
Right.
I thought.
So are there other variables other than what we're looking at that you're theoretically talking about in the back of your heads that I don't know about? Because you guys do and I don't?
for glass,
I mean, if I look at this and say option A, 1A is 35, and option 1B is 50, 35 and 50 is 85, and if I take 107 and 107, if that's the number. Well, what do you do with them? How do you compare the two, is what I'm trying to say.
35
What does
versus
that have to do-
107?
What does that have to do
Well,
with the two-year
wait.
contract we still have with Mascara?
It's just giving you some idea
Okay.
of how bids could come in.
What's that?
It gives you some idea of how.
right, I mean, these aren't your numbers.
We could, if Kugels will
They're not our
bid,
numbers.
These are,
Burn Township.
these are Burn Township's bid documents from last week.
see in the top left corner, Ron says
Oh,
Burn
right.
Township.
And
But what it
so
tells us
50,
is that if Kugels,
Mascara, 160, or what would our numbers be if you put them up there?
Landfill tonnage, we're paying about 120 per ton.
But what are you paying for recycling processing?
So Ron,
That's what we're looking at, recycling.
Ron, if we have a ton of bottles, 1 ton of bottles, it's gonna cost us $35. Okay, then we also have 1 ton of paper, that's gonna cost us $47. So for those 2 tons, we're gonna pay a total of
No.
$88. But if we had the same 1 ton of bottles to Mascara, we're gonna pay 107. And we have 1 ton of paper, we're gonna pay 107. Now we're paying 214 total instead of 87 total. See what I'm saying?
Because all I got is.
Yeah.
so like if you
So
bought apples
they
and
would somehow
bananas,
break it down.
you wouldn't add the prices of apples and bananas, you'd weigh them and multiply the unit.
The answer is way cheaper.
Yes, they are.
But at the moment, we're looking at it now, we're not looking at what everybody else is doing.
Well,
Well,
we're gonna bid in 2 months.
Right,
we're
but we don't
looking at-
have their bids, the other people's bids. Are these bids?
Yeah, those are bid
Okay.
prices.
Those are bid
We don't
results.
have, we don't have,
That bid opens.
Lotensky, and we don't
3 days ago.
have,
Because they're not gonna bid on it.
they're not, so
Not
nobody's
on,
bidding.
not on marketing, there's 2 material recovery facilities in Berks County, Total Recycle and Kugels. So those are, AJ Blazinski had a facility until they were bought out, and they no longer are processing
There's
material
the
there.
only 2 recycling plants in the area. So when we bid recycling, we're only gonna get bids from these 2.
Right.
And it's gonna probably look semi-similar to this.
Jim,
Well, for
explain how you
marketing,
use the term
processing, we're only gonna
marketing.
get,
Right.
I'm sorry?
Will you explain how you use the term marketing?
Sure.
Because that's,
Okay.
I think I've thrown people off.
Okay, so under your current bid, you have, and under the new proposed bid, you have a contractor that collects trash, recycling, yard waste. It may be the same company, it may be 3 different companies. And then you have this landfill contract, totally separate, and then you have a marketing contract, which means where are these recyclables gonna go to be turned into new products? So that's what these numbers are. That's one little piece of this contract, of your contract.
So you gotta pay somebody to pick it up, and you gotta pay somebody to take it off their hands. And that's marketing, is taking it off their hands. I think we should still do last minute,
Alright.
guys, if it's not too
So we're
complicated.
gonna, Jane, is it too complicated to do plastics 1 and 2 with glass and plastics 1 and 2 without glass?
no, that's what we were already proposing.
Yeah.
Well, that's, I just
Yeah,
wanted
that's what
to.
I
I just wanted to have like discussion so that
Yeah.
people
That's
would
great.
realize,
Yeah,
like, we need to look at those numbers when we get the bids in.
Right.
okay. Now, at the last meeting, in public comment, we were criticized by having a 25-mile limit for taking a recycling to the facility, and you might recall that I shared 25 miles is the only practical number, because you have to go more than 50 to get an alternative. And it's going to cost too much in transportation costs to go to 50, so we're stuck with the two within that radius.
Because there's nothing between 25 and 50, the furthest one is like 52,
55, something, yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Why do we care and specify? If Ms. Carroll, for example, can find a cheap place in Indiana, why do we care?
Right.
They need to, well, they need to know
They would
what their
look for the cheapest
transportation
place.
costs are going to be.
Yeah, they would look for the cheapest place. If I were
But-
bidding it,
But if I'm the like now we're gonna determine where we're gonna process the material. And as a vendor, I need to know how to be able to give you a price, where do you want me to take it? I need to know
Yeah.
Well,
how
why-
far I
why-
have,
they're
why
two
do we
separate
care?
But as he just pointed out,
Because-
he would say to you, I'm gonna take it to Canada,
but
what
we're,
do you care?
because we're telling you where you're gonna take it.
Why?
Why?
Because we're bidding that portion of it. So we're bidding marketing. So we have a contract with somebody to market the material and somebody to collect it. But if I'm the contractor, I need to know where do you want me to take it before I can give you a price.
Where it's being marketed.
Right.
Where
Just
it's
like
being
we
dropped
tell,
off,
just,
two different
just like we
bids.
tell the hauler in this contract, they have to take their trash to the Pioneer Crossing landfill, where the borough will pay.
Because we're stuck with Pioneer.
Right.
But I don't see why we're stuck to say, if I'm a bidder, I'm gonna look for the cheapest place that I can dump it. If I can dump it at a sinkhole at the Berkshire Mall, I'll do it there.
But then that's a different bid, that's a different bid, that's not what we can bid it that way, but that's
Yes.
not the way this bid is designed.
That's why I'm here to say, why?
Right.
I mean, you could put that option in. Just add some more options,
So the collector would also have to pay,
would also market the
would
material.
have to pay to
Yes.
market. the
Collect,
material.
transport, market it.
Do you think we're actually gonna get any bids if we did it that way? Other than from one obvious
Well,
one?
and,
Right.
well, we can't do that because we're locked in to Pioneer right now.
But you could do it on the marketing side
For marketing's for recycling.
of the recycling.
Oh, for the recycling.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the same for the yard waste.
I would think, but correct me if I'm wrong, Jane, but the further somebody goes out, okay, to market it and so forth, well, they're not gonna take it on the chin, they're gonna pass that price on to us. So it's an unspoken theory that they're gonna try to get somebody as close as possible, because it's gonna, in the long run, be cheaper for everybody else than going out 100 miles.
Right.
Well,
This-
even if
which
your
is-
tonnage
Right.
cost is cheaper, you still have gas and employee time.
That's what I'm referring to.
Get it there on top
sure.
of wear and tear on your vehicle.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about,
Yeah, and that's why we're saying it's gonna be one of these two facilities that you need to
Yeah,
do.
I mean, they can bid somebody 100 miles away, but they're not gonna be,
Right.
you know, they're not gonna be in the ballpark.
Yeah, unless they have a transfer station that they're gonna build somewhere and transfer it out, yeah.
Right.
So we're only paying, let me just double check, this bid that we're putting out for the marketing
Mhm.
is only for recycling.
Yes.
The trash is built into the collection fee.
There's no marketing for trash.
There's no
Marketing is back in the day when we used to be able to sell recycling to China and they would buy it.
Right,
There's never been a market that people want to buy our trash.
but we are gonna, I mean, we're still gonna, but we're gonna pay more the third year, so we are paying to have it dropped somewhere. Like,
Are we talking recycling or are we talking
Trash.
Trash.
yeah, so recycling, we're paying a marketing bid, and the 25-mile radius
Yep.
makes sense to me.
Yep.
For trash, we pay Pioneer right now, and we pay a collector.
Yep.
But the third year, the collector is gonna be in charge of both ends.
Yep.
Correct.
And so they can put it in the Berkshire Mall landfill,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
landfill, do Berkshire Mall landfill.
Correct.
They can put it wherever they want.
Correct.
They're
They
gonna
have
put
to
it in-
spell out on their bid sheet where that trash is being taken to for that third year, so we will
Right.
know where they're taking
Mhm.
it. But that cost to collect and dispose of is going to be one number in their bid for 28.
Right.
We'll dump it in Jersey just like everybody else does.
So yeah, I mean, the trash hauler is essentially gonna choose where to put it.
Within our
Right.
25-mile.
Not for trash.
That 25-mile radius is only
For
for
recycling.
recycling.
Yeah, and we're talking recycling. So, right now, we're telling them they have to recycle within 25-mile radius, correct?
Well, they have to take it to a facility within 25 miles.
They have to take it to the facility you tell them to take it to, within a 25-mile radius.
So as Bill just mentioned, if they say, I'll do it for $10 and I'm taking it to Canada, and you say, you can't take it to Canada, you say, why not? Because you can't possibly do it that cheaply. He says, I can do it that cheaply because I have a jet and I fly my trash to Canada. What difference does it make how they get it to wherever they take it, if that's their price? If we're gonna make them go to Pottstown, he said, I don't wanna go to Pottstown anymore, I'm building a racetrack down there, I'm taking it somewhere else, but I'm not gonna charge you more because I have really cool trucks and they're very economical. That's
We
up to them.
can do that, we just need to add another option.
Why wouldn't you add it? Because if the price is gonna go down because they'll do it cheap.
But we don't know that.
Well, we don't know it.
Right.
But if we don't give them an option to tell us, then we'll
Mhm.
never know.
Right.
Well, we can give them an option, and if nobody bids on it, nobody bids on the option,
So I'm adding an option.
Yep.
I guess.
Actually, two options. One with glass, one without.
So now we're gonna have 4 total for marketing. Am I just leaving it open-ended to a facility of the hauler's choosing?
You know, I've bid contracts and I reviewed contracts, so I'm looking at it both ways.
Right.
As a contractor, don't tell me where to pick the cheapest thing. I want to pick the cheapest.
As long as your bid's competitive, I don't really care where you dump it, you know?
All right, so is this all going to be single stream?
Yes.
Why do we have that Cleveland and Garfield?
So anything that's not highlighted, disregard, because it's no longer applicable.
Okay.
This was to illustrate every option that would be in the bid specs if we actually put it out to bid the way we discussed at the last meeting. Which is, as the conversation Jane, Jen, and I had, every contractor that bids on this would not only be confused, I think would be so frustrated
I was
with us.
confused.
Yeah. So the only things that we're proposing based off today's discussion, we would be putting in the bid are the items that are highlighted, with the understanding yard waste is gonna change to the second week of April for a 36-week period for the bi-weekly. And then marketing, we're gonna add 2 options, so instead of just 3A and 3B, there would be a 3C and a 3D.
Not on the marketing side, I think it's on the collection side.
Sorry. Okay, so we already have that.
Well, you have weekly and bi-weekly. So now we're gonna have we're gonna actually add 4 different options. Weekly, bi-weekly, with glass, without glass.
I think already have that.
And they market it.
So, yeah, under, this is what we currently have, we have 4 options for recycling.
Yep.
So weekly, bi-weekly, glass, no glass.
Yep. We're
And
gonna
then-
add 4 more. Because now they're marketing the material. So it's these same options
With them
with them
marketing.
marketing. So I think we get back to this mess.
Yeah.
And you think with all those options, that's feasible?
No.
No.
That's why
It's
we're
not.
having this meeting. to
Michelle and
begin
I were
with.
like, who's on
Yeah.
second?
Yeah.
You'll just say, I'm not bidding.
No,
That's
it's
right.
Yeah.
You
Won't
have,
bid.
Borough
Yeah.
has to figure out what you want, and then you put it in the document. And I think we did that with the curbside alley,
Yeah.
non-alley thing.
And I think the Google numbers look good, especially
They look
whatever
great.
it is. What's that, are they Google
Yeah,
Yeah.
versus Mascaro?
right.
I think,
And
But
you
if
know
you're,
you're
if you're
competing.
providing options that are not necessarily our options, we're just giving the haulers the options to pick from this list. And if they don't think it's complicated and they can do it more economically, then they'll look at it and say yes. If they don't think they can, they'll just scratch it all off and just do the ones they can do, right?
Well, Jane agreed with Bill that we should require a pre-bid.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Because
So
it
they
is
do it.
confusing.
Yeah.
If it's confusing to us, we know it's not confusing to them, because we do this all the time.
I think we are, I think we are having an odd, I think our bid specs are gonna be odd to them.
Yes.
I mean, even
You need to
Michelle
be
had a hard
challenged.
time
You've been doing it too
writing
long.
it, and
This is one of the
given
most
how,
confusing
Sure.
requests for visit I've ever seen.
right, and that's not a good, that is not a good thing.
Yeah.
It is not a good thing.
But I like options though because it lets them bid low on the things they can bid low.
Right.
And the things they're not interested in, they either will not bid or give us a price so high, saying, are those idiots gonna take this price? We're not gonna take that price.
So where should we consider paring down the options? Should we,
I think we are.
do we think we've done what we can?
The thing you threw in that's kind of inflating them again is the marketing, leaving it open-ended to where it's taken. But
And, I mean, you're talking about more than double the distance. Like, I don't know. It feels like a lot of extra options that I don't think we're gonna get.
I mean,
We're not
'cause
gonna save a ton of money like.
right, I mean, you've got, there's two facilities that your haulers can go to. They're not taking it to Canada. They're not taking it to New Jersey. They're gonna take it to one of those two facilities. Waste Management may run it to their Allentown facility, depending on if they've got to transfer somewhere. But, so the real question is, JP Mascaro is gonna bid taking it to his facility. He's gonna be the only one taking it to his facility. Everybody else is gonna take it to Kugel's. So the question is, does Republic have a better deal than Kugel's is willing to give the borough? Is really the question. What are these guys paying and how old are those contracts? And are they good for them? And are they, does that contract get them through the next 3 years of this contract? This way, we know all those answers by us marketing the material.
That makes sense.
Well, it's because you think you know the answer before they give us their answer.
But they don't, there's nowhere else for them to take it.
Well, let them tell us that.
Well, they will when they did it.
Well, we're talking
Right.
about not bidding it because we already know it's not gonna happen because it's too complicated.
Or we're talking about not cluttering this up to the point where people refuse to bid because they've thrown up their hands.
So what happens if,
Our concern is that they're not gonna take their time to look at that and say, oh, I can ignore those 4 things. They're just gonna say, there's 20 options, the hell with it, life's too short.
Yeah, it's not worth their time to put a bid together with that many options.
You have to remember too, you can get these bids and reject them all and rebid it.
Right.
Not that we wanna do that, but
Right.
we
Yeah.
could do that.
Well, and you may have to
If we do it in July.
if the low bidder misses something because
Right.
it's too
Yeah,
complex.
exactly.
And JP Mascaro's lawyer comes in and says, you're gonna reject that bid.
Right, that's
That's why we
right.
have. a
Because that's what
pre-bid
they'll do.
conference.
what's that?
That's why we have a pre-bid conference.
yeah,
Right.
For them to say, hey, what do you mean by this? Or, that's really dumb, I can't bid on something like that. But I never try to outguess a contractor who's greedy and wants to make money. We're not trash haulers, we're not recycle haulers.
no, but I think Jane has enough expertise in the industry from looking at how many of these contracts and bid specs to speak pretty closely.
I think
don't
where
think
we're at,
I don't think we're gonna be the only borough or municipality in the state of Pennsylvania that gave out bids and everybody said, keep your own trash, we're not doing it, and you guys, we're not that smart to figure this out.
it's
They
not
will
that we're
figure it
not
out.
gonna get bids,
Well, then let's wait and see what they are.
but the more options we have, the more complicated the bid process is, the fewer bids we will receive. Because there are people who are gonna say there's too much there, and we want the most number of bids we can get. Because the more people out there with their bid papers, the more competition there is, and they realize, like you said before, they're gonna have 2 or 3 bids in their pocket.
So if
And
nobody-
say, there's nobody else here, we're gonna give them the highest bid. If they say there's one other guy here, you know, they're gonna, you know, but if there's 10 guys out there, they're all fighting, they've all got a 10% chance, they're gonna go low.
So Is that good or bad?
That's
good.
good, we want
That's
them to
what we
bid as
want.
low as possible, so that it's as cheap as possible.
We
I
want
can see us,
we want
like,
the-
like Jay mentioned, I can see us getting 4 bids at most.
Mhm.
Right,
2 guaranteed, the other 2 maybe.
right, but do we want to lose one of those 4 bids because we have too many options and they're like,
Absolutely
no.
not.
right,
No.
so we want all 4 bids, we wanna keep this as uncomplicated as
That's-
possible.
The KISS method,
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
yes.
My mom would say that to her 5th grade students all the time.
Now you're dating me.
So, does that mean we're not adding those 4
Well,
options?
I
I
vote not to
personally
add
think it's counterproductive.
Yeah, I don't think we should have them.
Are they allowed to not bid on those
Yes.
other
You
options?
think it not bid on
And
Well,
everything.
Well, how complicated could it be if you give them 4 other options and they say, I'm not bidding on that, I'm not bidding on that, I'm not bidding on that, I'm not bidding on that?
We
They
don't
have
want
the options.
we don't want them to look at a specification with 20 options and say,
And figure out which
There's
ones
not
they wanna
20,
bid on and not.
There's only 6.
no,
No,
no, no, no, no, no,
nine.
no, no,
There's
no,
currently-
no, no.
There's currently 9 and there would be 4 more added, so there
So
would
there's
be
gonna be
So how
13.
many would there be if you don't add these few that?
9.
Nine.
you mentioned? 9.
If
That's
we
a
add
lot.
them.
13.
Yeah.
So we're taking it to 13. How many options?
They
do
have an
you
estimator that
municipalities have?
can't do that.
4 or 5.
I don't
4 or
trust
5.
this
So we're already
contract.
double.
We are already double what the other
Maybe
municipalities
Springs
have,
was
normally
pretty
have for
close.
options.
So you wanna
They
go
have
to
4 or
triple
5.
it.
Yeah, it's too many options.
You know, I would wonder if you just, hey, how about each of us dials a phone number to one of these potential bidders and you say to them, we're gonna have 9 options. Is that okay with you? They're
That's
gonna say no.
That's
not
illegal.
appropriate.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, we're not telling what they are, we're just gonna say 9. If you can't say 9, can you say 1? They gotta come here to bid on some options. Are you not allowed to say 2? Can you say 3, but you can't say 4?
I wouldn't say any because I would never make that kind of a phone call. And you're more gutsy than I am if you would.
My only point is, if they say, no, I'm not bidding on it, if you give us 4 options, then that's one person you don't have to worry about. They said no. But if you say,
But we want them to bid, we don't wanna not
I know
worry
you
about
want
them.
them to bid, but you don't want them to bid because you don't think that they would come back
I
with a
would just-
bid that's too low.
I want them to bid, I want the
We
most
want them to
possible
bid
bids.
as low
So
as
you
possible.
keep them in?
No,
Option?
take out the 4 useless ones.
Well, okay,
I mean-
that's where we started.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think you give options there. You know, I've never done contracts as small as this, so I'm just giving my expertise from both sides, okay? When I bid multi-million-dollar contracts and when I review multi-million-dollar contracts, a contractor doesn't like to be told what he can do and not do. He likes to do what's best for him, and what's best for him is to be the lowest responsible bidder, which is the bottom line of any bid. He's not gonna bid on stuff he can't do or he doesn't like. But if you tell me that he's confused, right, that's why he comes to the pre-bid conference and he says, you know, you guys made it much more complicated than it should be. And that's why you have a pre-bid conference.
Well,
it's to a-
we're not putting any financial burden on the hauler by saying it has to be within 25 miles, because they're not paying the marketing fee. So it's not a burden to say, look, you're not gonna drive it past 25 miles. We're telling them, look, this is as far as you have to go. They're not going, oh, well, it would be cheaper for me to go 50 miles.
But why wouldn't that be, it would be something they would wanna do?
Yes.
Why would
It's cheaper for them to
But
take
it's,
it
but
further.
no,
Why
what I'm
would-
saying is it's not costing them anything to stay in the 25. It's gonna cost them more to go 50 because they have to drive further. They're not paying that marketing fee, that drop-off fee. We're just paying them to drive. So if we're telling them they have to drive 52 miles, their price is gonna be a lot higher.
Well,
Plus
if
they
it were
want
that
certainty
simple,
when
it would
they're
not
bidding.
make any sense for them to drive it further. But you're saying they're stupid, they would never do that, so why even put it there? And Bill is saying, you don't know what they do when they do what they do. They could say, we're gonna drive it to Pittsburgh, and you can't say it's cheaper if you drive it to Pottstown.
Well,
because you're not the
We,
one.
we don't care.
All we're doing
We're
by
looking out
making.
for the taxpayers' money.
Right.
That's all
Yeah.
we're looking for.
Right.
And if
That's our
they say they can do
responsibility.
it cheaper, then what we're suggesting they should be able to do.
They're not
is
paying for the
20.
marketing, what we're trying to do is get cheaper what you're trying to do is get cheaper marketing, but your collector's gonna be paying, prices are gonna go way up, because they might have to go 55 miles instead of 10 miles.
I move so.
It's not an election, but
I know, but.
Yeah.
I'm a judge of elections, and
Yeah, I don't think we're saving any money.
well,
By
let's try, you know, doesn't
Alright, so
hurt.
all we're doing is making a recommendation to council, so we will tell our council, we're split on this issue, we will explain the pros and cons, and council can decide. Because we don't decide anything, we recommend. Is that where we are?
Sure.
Okay. Alright, any other
Where's that
options?
dead horse been beaten?
Alright, any other options we need to look at, Jane or Michelle?
That's it.
Alright,
Well, I just wanna, I had two things, when I read through the big spec, it's not options. On page 12, for option 1, collection and transportation, it says also included is the collection, transportation, and disposal starting on January 1st, 2028.
Yep. Cause that's when the disposal contract's up.
Okay, thank you. I was like, why doesn't it say 26? But that's part of the Pioneer,
Yep.
and then, okay. And then my other one was on page 27. It talks about the public right of way, the trash and recycling, do you understand?
We
what that
define
goes
it.
Public right of way.
We define it.
And I read that lower, but like, so it's allowed to be in the public right of way. Yeah.
I mean, it can't be on private property, cause then you're contractor trespassing every time.
But here it says trash or recycling containers shall not be left within the public right of way after they are emptied.
So go back to the definition of public right of way, and we basically spell out the planning strip as the area they can put them back, that it is
Okay,
okay.
okay, that's cool. That's all I
And
had.
just looking at the agenda, we started with 22, we went down to 9 or 13. That seems to be an improvement.
Yes.
well, it's an improvement.
The 9 is still double what most municipalities the options for, so I think 9 is
I
good.
never look at what other people do.
Okay, but
Yeah.
these are not, the companies who have bid on your contracts have probably a zillion people just in the bid specification department. And these folks are relatively small businesses.
We've got people that just
They,
do that.
they do,
Right.
but it's not like
Municipal
they've got.
contracts. Correct.
And sometimes they hire people to do it, because there are trained estimators.
Well, we'll have both options for council.
Alright, so is there a motion to make these recommendations to council for inclusion in the bid specifications?
So, let me ask you a question before this motion comes up. So are we saying we're gonna submit to council a suggestion that is either what Bill is saying and what you're saying, and let them box it out?
Well, also what we agreed upon, when yard waste we picked up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all those things.
Either
We agreed on
four or
almost everything.
4 or 6, or what is it, what's the difference between?
We agreed on 9
We
things,
agreed
the
on
question
all
is
9
whether to.
options.
Right, and he was saying we should add the other 4. So the real question is, how do you, because we're sitting here going up and down, left and right, we're just gonna have a council meeting and say there's 9 or 4, and somebody's all in favor of 9, put your hand up, because you're gonna have to discuss this to people that are just like him, are gonna know, gonna ask these questions, right? You're not just gonna say, let's vote.
We're
Yeah,
gonna
but
give
it's,
background.
we'll give background, but it's only background on
The marketing piece.
the marketing.
No, I understand.
So,
But we're gonna have to tell Rick, tell Steve, and whoever else is in the room, here's what this is all about. What do
yeah,
you
Melissa
think?
takes really good notes too, so they'll read the
Yes.
council packet and get some
I'm sure they'll read our minutes
Yes.
very closely.
I would suggest that when the council packet goes out, then just have people pay particular attention to this, because there's gonna be some discussion,
At the meeting.
and
Right.
prepare any questions you may have, so they can be answered.
Sounds good.
choices, to limit options or to permit options.
Well, yes and no. All right, so is there a motion to recommend that council include either the 9 or the 13 options which we discussed?
Revenge.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Any public comment?
Every day, 41 Cardinal Road. First of all, talking about 25 miles, I can say that limiting it is obviously in favor of Mascaro. Imagine there will be a desire, a project to establish something on the 26 mile that is not existing anymore right now, but it can exist in the future. We have previous contract 25 miles, we have this contract 25 miles. Nobody will establish it. They know this municipality and somebody else always limited to 25 miles. We will not get them. So in imposing this limit, we are cutting off our future, first. Second, I understand that the most interested person is Mr. Jenkins, and he is controlling the whole borough. He can, with his desire.
I don't control anything, sir.
Let me say, please,
and I
sir,
resent
I'm
the
not
comment.
talking about you. It's a comment about 25 months. And you are here to tell us we have to have this 25 months. Let me finish, please. So, that's why I can tell what I saw. For example, Jane had her own project as to convert the commission to a council. It was denied, and we know who is in charge here. Also, as I see, the representative of the Berks County is too many times involved into this deals with recycling in the borough, and she may be also somehow involved with promoting the existing Mascaro company. So I see that demanding to make this limitation is not for the benefit of our community. Last thing, as I see, we have definition of right of way. In November, Michelle told me that, okay, in her email, the piece of grass you have as 8 feet, it is right of way. Then later on, in April, she said, no, it's not. When I asked one lawyer, the lawyer told me, oh, I cannot judge here, we have to ask somebody else. And when I asked actually the lawyer who created this definition, Mr. Hartman, he read it and he told me after the meeting, he didn't want to tell it in the meeting, that this definition doesn't make sense at all, because first part of it contradicts with the last part. So we don't have definition, and if we use it in the current contract, we have to ask Mr. Hartman to rewrite it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And as I told you, I feel that, previously told you, that I feel that the Mascaro company is using somebody's desire to punish me for helping removing of no parking zone at my neighbors, and they started putting my trash cans, my recycling cans into my to my walkway, to my entrance. And this is exactly the same as it was with my neighbor. And this is, as I see, is by the desire of the board. And it is in the right of way as we consider it in the other chapter. And in this chapter, in this contract, as Mr. Hartman told me, it makes no sense. It should be deleted in the way it is written now. Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned. No, it's not a back and forth, but you're welcome to talk to him.
No, I'm not talking to him. Nothing to do with him.
I have
It has to do with
You
January.
have one public comment, I'm sorry, the meeting's not adjourned.
Yeah, Bill Jenks, Sturbridge Drive. Just the only public comment is in clarification, as I understand it from the Pennsylvania Code of Boroughs, the president of council has the responsibility to keep a meeting moving along. That is all. The president of council does not control any meeting, nor has final say or approval. That is done by council as a whole, okay? So the comments that were made earlier are misleading, they're false. He's been told before they're false. So I just wanted to clarify that. And to also say that any council member can attend any meeting. The only reason I am here today is just to listen to the meeting. I'm interested in what you people came up with the contract. You've done some wonderful work on it. And it was in my right to come to this meeting as it was for him to come and listen to it. Okay? So I just wanted those points and clarifications made. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thanks. The only thing I'd like to say is, I think we all are lucky to have a guy like this who's here that has done more contracts than any of us have ever done in all parts of the world, and has an expertise that rivals probably Jane's expertise in the same way. I think that this sort of mark-off we're doing as to Jim's theory, and I don't think we really got a definitive position with respect to what he's suggesting, other than to listen to everybody saying what they're saying. But I think that if we're going to give this to council, they deserve to listen to him and to Jane in paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, because if you ask me to do it, I'll do a half-assed job compared to him, and I don't know who would do a half-assed job compared to Jane, but probably all of us would be in that boat too. So I'd like to see what he wants to write down succinctly, and Jane can either agree with him or disagree or say, I don't really care, I like all you guys, and let the borough figure it out. But I think just us sitting there is not really going to do it justice.
So 2 points, Bill certainly is welcome to come to the meeting and speak on the issue, and number 2, that is why we unanimously voted for Bill and Twyla to be on this committee.
Good being on it and not talking isn't helpful, but if you're going to let him speak, that's great.
Well, as we've done in other council meetings, when it's come to a subject where we have a qualified individual and or expert at that meeting, we extend them a courtesy to be heard in excess of 5 minutes, because it is not a public comment session per se, it is an advisory matter.
Just like with rec board.
Great.
Yeah,
and
and it
then
would,
he speaks
and it would
up.
come up under your,
Yeah, absolutely.
your report.
It comes to kids.
You don't want to stick something through your ear. All right, now the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
What a puppet.